so there is rejoicing in heaven. The angels are happy. Similarly, the woman who loses one of her 10 coins lights a lamp and sweeps the house and looks until she finds that coin. And again, there is rejoicing in heaven. More rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people. I had a small moment this week, right? In the stories, people lose common things that they need. I lost my iPad this week, and I was a little panicked because I can't do much without my iPad. And Kathy said, "Well, where did you see it last?" And I thought about where it had been, and there it was in the back seat of my car where I had left it. And yes, there was a little rejoicing in our household. Last May in Hawaii, on the island of Maui, a young woman by the name of Amanda Eller went for a hike, a short hike, in the Makawao Forest Preserve. And she'd walked there before. She got out of her car and she left her phone and her bottle of water and her wallet in the car. And she went for a walk. It was going to be about 3 miles. And she got a little ways along the way and she took a break. And then she tried to find her way back, but her instincts got backwards. Instead of walking back towards the car, she walked deeper and deeper into the forest. She didn't intend to get lost. We almost never intend to get lost. But she got lost. She was lost for days. On the 3rd day, she fell off a cliff and she fractured her leg. Of course, they organized a search party, an official search party, and they went out and they looked over the area for 5 full days, and they didn't find her. So after 5 days, the official search party was called off. But there were some volunteers, and they said, "We can't stop now. We need to keep going." And so they searched and they searched. They went and dove into ponds to see if she was there. They climbed up on hills and they looked everywhere and they searched for days. The person who was coordinating the search, a volunteer, got fired from his job because he had missed so much work. And her family offered a reward for her being found, and they hired a helicopter that flew over the area and looked and looked. On the 17th day, they found her. She was dehydrated and her leg was still fractured, but she was alive. And they brought her home, and you can imagine there was great rejoicing. So there is the official search party that stopped after 5 days. That's probably how long they were allowed as part of their job to look. And then there were the volunteers that searched and searched until they found her. Like the man in the parable of the sheep and like the woman in the parable of the coins, they searched until they found her. God is not like the official search party that quits after 5 days. God is like the volunteer who searches for us and searches until we are found. In a couple minutes, we're going to sing Amazing Grace, that well-known song written some 300 years ago by John Newton. Perhaps you know the story of John Newton. He grew up and his father was a sailor. And so at a very young age, he too became a sailor, and he was on sailing ships going around the world. He had a lot of misadventures, and he embraced the life of being a sailor. He was at one point captured and for a short time forced to be a slave. But eventually, he became a ship's captain. And he captained 3 ships that sailed and did trading, and they were, in fact, slave ships. There were ships that left Britain with cargo, and they went to Africa, and there they traded the cargo, and they picked up slaves, and then they went across to the Americas with the slaves. So the route was from Europe to Africa, Africa to the Americas, and then back. And so the trip from Africa to the Americas is known as the Middle Passage. And that's the passage where they carried the slaves. The slaves were kept in the underbelly of the ship, and they were given very little food, very little water. There was not good sanitation down there. There was not light. Typically on these passages, a third of the slaves died and were thrown overboard. Later, John Newton was converted. He became a Christian, and eventually became an Anglican clergy person and had a long ministry and wrote songs about being lost and being found, like Amazing Grace. But he was haunted by what he had done. The picture of those slaves that he had transported from Africa to the Americas was before his mind all the time. And he was in deep agony over his sin. William Wilberforce, who was the leader of the abolition movement in Great Britain, came to John Newton and wanted to talk to him and gain his help. And Newton was in such despair that he could barely talk to Wilberforce. But Wilberforce said, "You need to take this terrible experience you've had and do something with it. You need to write about what you saw." And so John Newton wrote a description of what the slave trade was like. And he portrayed the horrors of the slave trade very vividly. And John Newton's writing was a key to helping Great Britain abolish the slave trade. And in 1807, December of 1807, several months before John Newton died, Great Britain abolished the slave trade. John Newton had been lost, and he had been found. And he used his experience, his terrible experience, he used that for good. And he helped abolish the slave trade in Great Britain. Perhaps some of you have great stories of conversion. Anyone who has a dramatic story of conversion? No, we're Lutherans. We don't have those dramatic stories very often. I don't. I was raised in the church. But when I was a young person, I became lost in a certain way. When I was a kid in high school, I was a skinny little thing and pretty weak, and I aspired to be an athlete, but that was not something I could hardly, as they say, walk and chew gum at the same time. And in fact, I was also a very anxious person. And when I was in high school, there were times, especially when I remember when it was wrestling in PE class or swimming in PE class, my stomach was just in knots and could be almost immobilized. But I got through high school and I made it okay. And then my freshman year of college, the spring semester, the anxious stomach got so bad I could barely eat. I would go to the cafeteria, get my food, take a couple bites, and my stomach, the acid in there would just be swirling and I couldn't eat. And so I was hungry all the time because I wasn't eating and I couldn't eat. And I don't know that I've ever been as miserable in my whole life. Now, my family was one of those that you only go to the doctor, if you've cut off a finger or done something seriously. And we certainly didn't worry about mental health issues. But when I got home from college after my freshman year, 1971, good Lord, I'm old. I went to my dad and I told him what was going on, that his stomach was so bad and I could barely function. And he said, well, let's go to the doctor and check it out. So I went to the doctor and they were concerned that maybe it was an ulcer, right? Which would be pretty serious. And so they had me drink that chalky stuff and they did the x-ray and no ulcer. And within a couple days, the stomach problems went away. And I've never had them nearly that bad since in all these years. I have to think that it was a psychosomatic issue, which was very real, but psychosomatic, and that my father taking the time and the energy and showing the care to take me to the doctor was a key to the cure. I was lost, but I got found. In our lives, we have different roles at different times. Sometimes we're the ones who are lost in an infinite variety of ways. And then we need to remember that God will seek after us until we are found. And when we are found, the angels will rejoice. And sometimes we are the ones who might notice that someone else is lost. And when we do that, we may have the opportunity to help them be found. We might be the agents of their being found, like my dad was for me. And then the angels will rejoice. My prayer for you this week is that you remember the times you have been lost and how God's love has found you. And you pay attention. Maybe there is someone lost in your life, and found, and the angels will rejoice. In Jesus' name.